what made you decide to become an attorney? Like, what inspired you? And describe your law school experience.
Oh, that's really interesting. What made me decide to become an attorney? Well, I've decided that anytime I have a decision to make, I tend to go back to school. So my ex-husband and I separated, had 2 young children. They were 5 and 7. And I thought, well, I should take the LSAT and see how I do, because we were here in Raleigh. So this is a decision step by step. I took the LSAT, and I did fine, and was accepted at various law schools. And so I chose to go to UNC because I thought I would want to. My decisions were around making things easier for my kids, I think. So I thought I'll go to Chapel Hill, and they can stay in school here. And they were in school, and it was a great time to have young children and go back to school because they were in school. So I could go to class, they could go to class. I had a great carpool that came when we drove back and forth from Raleigh to Chapel Hill every day. Maria Lynch was in my carpool, so we'd known each other all that time from when we first started law school. Anyway, so I had been to graduate school before. I had started a PhD in English at Vanderbilt, and I went to Texas Tech to undergraduate school, so I kept moving east. Anyway, and so law school is so very different from graduate school in English, because the idea in graduate school was that maybe this was an unspoken thing, but it was pretty much learning for learning's sake. And you were not there to see, to compare your grades with anybody else's grades or to feel competitive about anybody else. And of course, the classes were very small seminars. And you pretty much went through the material and work at your own pace. And then law school came, and the classes, had 100 people or more. They tended to be somewhat competitive. You certainly knew what other people were making by the end of the semester because, you just compared grades. How did you do? How did you do? So all of that was very different. And there was just this, I don't know, maybe it was because, and I was older than my classmates. I had been out of school, back to school. I was 39 when I graduated from law school. So, that made some difference. But I liked law school. It was challenging. My children were still young enough that, they went to bed early at night and I could sit and read. And anyway, driving to Chapel Hill was not bad. The traffic was not much at that time. So anyway, law school itself, though, was just my memory is that just my comparison with graduate school. Graduate school was small class, not competitive. Law school, large class, more competitive. And I liked both, but they were very different.
And what was the year that you graduated law school?
Good question. 1979.
Okay. No. Okay. So take us from there. Take us from 1979. You finished law school. Can you take us through your career path?
Okay. Well, my career, the interesting thing about my career path is that it didn't I went to work for a law firm that at that time was called Tharrington Smith and Hargrove. It then became Tharrington Smith. That's the only place I ever worked. I did not have a summer job. I had not worked in an office before I walked in the door of that office. But I found a great place for me. There were only 6 or 7 lawyers there when I started. I was the first woman to be in the firm, first woman lawyer, so sometimes they didn't quite know what to do with me. Like on Secretary's Day, I got a little flower and that sort of thing. But also on Lawyer's Day, I got, whatever the lawyers got, so anyway. But so it was early days in women being in the, not early days, but there are many things that have changed since then. So, for example, I don't know whether you want to put all this in or not, but when I was applying for jobs from Chapel Hill when I was in law school, the word around the law school was, oh, you can't get a job in Raleigh. Raleigh firms do not hire women. And I thought, well, and most of the women who were in the bar at that time in Raleigh worked for the state or worked for the government in some way. But anyway, my thought when I heard that was, well, they're behind the curve, because women are certainly being hired by law firms all over the state, certainly in the cities. And sure enough, it was a good time to be looking for a job in Raleigh as a woman. And I liked Tharrington, Smith, and Hargrove because their practices were interesting. There was Harold Tharrington had he had kind of a general civil practice at that time, centered on family law. Wade and Roger Smith had a criminal defense practice. Wade Hargrove had a practice that was a communications law practice. And so when I first came there, one of the first things I did was write a long brief for Wade Hargrove about why there should be cameras in the courtroom. And I don't remember what the result of that was, but at some point cameras got in the courtroom at some point. But that was one of the first things I did. And I did a lot of writing for things. My children would say, well, what do you do? What do you do? And I would say, well, I go to the library. And one would go up to the Supreme Court library that was on the top floor of the Justice Building and sit and do research, and then write something. I wrote a lot of briefs. Tharrington was great to work for because he would give me a lot of once I did something. If I wrote a brief for the Court of Appeals or for the Supreme Court, he would say, well, you go argue it. You wrote it. So he didn't all of a sudden step forward and say, I'm going to do the case. He would let me do whatever. And then at some point, when my children were saying, what do you do all day? I would say, well, I talk on the phone. Because, again, my practice gradually became a family law practice and not a communications law practice. And I would talk on the phone to clients a lot and talk on the phone to witnesses, talk on the phone to clients, talk on the phone to other attorneys, much more than sitting and writing. So talk to me about, because you touched on it a little, the importance of mentorship for attorneys because it sounds like you had some good mentors, and then tell us about reaching behind you and being a mentor yourself as your career went on. Oh, okay. Well, Tharrington Smith, at that time, there were only 7 attorneys. So there was not some rigid structure about, here, you're going to work and do this for 2 weeks, and we're going to give you A, B, and C experiences, and we're going to. But I worked mostly with Wade Hargrove or with Harold Tharrington. And Harold was a mentor that was good because, again, he would let me have experiences that right away. And one of the first cases I worked on with him had to do with an estate problem. And the attorney on the other side of the case made a motion to dismiss the case for lack of jurisdiction. And I thought, well, of course, and I'm the one that, said, here, let's do this. And the case got dismissed, and the statute of limitations had run, and the whole case would have been out of court. Harold just did not blink an eye. He said, well, we'll just appeal that. And so we appealed it, and it was reversed, and the case stayed on track. But he was a great mentor for that reason. And he would certainly let me sit in when he interviewed clients and things like that. Wade Hargrove, I always think of him as a person who taught me how to write a letter to somebody, because he said every letter you should be able to look at that letter, read the letter, and understand from the beginning what it's about. So that at the beginning of a letter, you're going to have some little review, not in an awkward way, about what the letter's about and where you're headed in the letter. And it's just one of those things, you'd never think about that with a particular kind of letter. Anyway, and I think I learned at that point, again, I was older, but mostly by just observing people and watching people, and also observing other attorneys. The bar was small enough. I remember, again, when I was handling an appeal of a family law case, and the attorney on the other side of the case was Gene Boyce, and we sat out on the mall and to state, together the question on appeal. I mean, I was the person appealing, but it didn't trouble him to make sure the question was stated in the right way. And at that time too, when you had an appeal, you had to do a narration of the evidence in court. There was no recording, or you could have recording, or people couldn't afford a court reporter usually for a family law case, and so you'd have to write a narration. And Jack Hunter, another person who had been practicing law for a long time and had a family law practice as part of his practice, we sat together and did the narration from the two sides of the case. So there was that sort of thing from attorneys who were in other practices. And as far as my mentoring other people, I don't remember any particular, again, formality about mentoring, but I was conscious of, being the one in charge of cases and being sure people understood about what needed to be done. I guess one thing that was a kind of mentoring I did, I went for a number of years. I worked with the family law section of the North Carolina Bar Association and planned seminars for family law attorneys, helped plan those things, and then also spoke at least one a year, which takes a lot of time to prepare a manuscript and present it. So,
and talk about the change, not just at Tharrington Smith, but across Wake County's legal landscape through your career.
I would say the major change. So I began practicing law, so in the 80s, and I ended in 2013. And the major change was in the speed at which things needed to be accomplished. So at the beginning, again, when I was doing communications law work, and we represented a company that was in Chapel Hill, and we would need to send material to them. It would be put in the mail to be sent from here to Chapel Hill, and sometimes it would take a week for the manuscript or whatever to get over there. And now, or by the end of my practice, or well before the end of my practice, that first there was fax, and then there was every other swift form of communication, and along with that came the idea, particularly sometimes from clients, maybe from business clients more than others, that things needed to happen right away. And I know I would sometimes say to clients that just wait a minute, I have to have time to think about it. Let me think about this before we go off in some direction.
And technology, you spoke to that. I mean,
it's changed and changed and changed.
And talk to us about the importance of your association with the Bar Association. Why was that so important to your career? What would you tell someone about that benefit?
I would say it meant everything to my career. Again, John Parker, who was a judge at that time, and he was always active in family law things, encouraged me to be active in Bar Association things. And, he said that it was the North Carolina Bar Association was just beginning to have sections for areas of practice, for specialty areas of practice. So there was a family law section, and John said, Carlyn, you should write the case summaries for a newsletter. This is another example of how information was spread. So every 2 weeks, I knew the day that the Court of Appeals handed down decisions. So I would walk up the street to the Court of Appeals, read the decisions, and write summaries for the family law newsletter. And so from doing that, and then became the editor of the newsletter. I mean, it was mostly case summaries, but then I became active in the family law section, and I got to know family law attorneys all over the state, and it was just a real pleasure to know people all over the state like that, and to understand, a lot of people in solo practices, people in the attorneys in Charlotte were often in larger practices. So it was key to my my enjoyment of practice, just to know attorneys from all over the state. And also, again, the family law bar in Raleigh was not so huge that you didn't get to know the people you were working with who were on the other sides of cases.
And the Wake County Bar here in Raleigh, like,
Yeah.
was that important for you for like walking down Fayetteville Street?
Why what? Say that again?
Was that beneficial to you, say, going down Fayetteville Street when you would see others that you knew? Like,
Oh, certainly. I mean, I mean, I loved practicing law. I was very lucky. It was the thing for me. I taught school long before, and I liked that, but it got tiring. But I always liked practicing law, and it's because there was enough variety. I didn't talk on the phone all day. I liked to write. I got to write things. I got to know people in other parts. And when I was president of the Bar Association, one of the things that I really wanted to try to help the local lawyers do, as we became more and more specialized, to know lawyers in other areas of practice. And I think that's something that's important for the local bar association, really.
that's a great point. So no one's mentioned it in that capacity of meeting people in other areas of law. That's great. How did you manage the case management?
Meaning years. I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean by case management.
How did you manage the stress of the job and handling everything?
Well, again, I liked it, so that helps a lot. And I also, one of my rules, and this is kind of, I did not represent people I did not like. I didn't all of a sudden have somebody appear in my office and say, oh, okay, I'm going to be your lawyer. I would have talked to them on the phone for a little bit, just to get a feel for whether I was the right person for them. And that's important, particularly in family law, since you're dealing with, a very important individual thing. And so I think Roger Smith said this to me once. He says, there's no such thing as a small case. And so I liked that about family law, that there were all different kinds of cases, and the cases didn't go on forever. They didn't last for years and years. And you got to go to court sometimes, and you got to work things out sometimes. And so, it was just, I liked the variety. And as far as managing all that, again, I was lucky in the law firm I was with. We had within the law firm a great deal of independence. So that nobody was saying, you must take this case. Or, so I could I had, again, I think it's because I was older when I started. I had a great deal of freedom to use my own judgment as I built a practice about how I wanted to handle it.
And outside the law, your life outside the
What life? No.
How was it, and what kept you centered? What outside the law was important to you?
Well, again, that may have changed some. Of course, it changed over time. I mean, when my children were growing up, my focus was on my children. And, I did the things that, any parent does. We had soccer practice and carpools and, what we did Sunday morning and this and that and the other. And again, the neighborhood I lived in, I'm such a person of habit. I've never moved from the house I lived in. I've lived in the same house for 50 years. And so it was, I made sure my child rearing theory was I needed to be around. I needed to be present physically. So everything was pretty much centered on my work or my children. And I liked both of them. As the years went by, I liked to travel. I've traveled more. At some point, I just started riding my bicycle a lot, and so I'd go on bike trips, and on the weekends usually have a bike ride. And anyway, so that was, I didn't, I'm not sure I was ever just totally stressed out about work.
Did any of your children or grandchildren go as laws?
No. Well, my grandchildren the older ones just graduated from college about 4 years ago, but I don't think either will become a lawyer. I thought one might, but I don't think he likes what he's doing, and the one is a journalist. He likes what he's doing. Neither of my sons even thought about it, I don't think. I don't know why, but maybe I don't know. I've had other attorneys say, oh, my child would never go into law. He saw me work too much. He thought it was too hard.
But that wasn't the case with you. I mean,
well, they saw me work a lot, certainly, because I worked, and this changed over time, but when I was, I would often go to work on Saturdays. I did not work at night during the week usually because, again, they were there and it was, things had to be taken care of. But, I would go to work on Saturdays, ride my bike downtown and about 9 o'clock in the morning, come back about 3 in the afternoon. Many Saturdays.
When you look back, what moment or what case or anything like that, what makes you the most proud looking back?
Oh. Well, I think the most, as far as accomplishments, maybe it was, well, I think I was a good lawyer. I think I helped my clients. And again, I found because I was, I liked what I did. I think as far as accomplishments to be proud of, I think I accomplished a lot when I was president of the Wake County Bar. That we set up a lot of things that still happen. And so that's nice to see that things lasted.
So when you see things like the creed that you helped develop, and what goes through your heart then? What do you hope for those things?
For what? Say again?
So like, for example, the creed that you
helped
develop,
right.
When you see it now, or you hear it read, or what do you hope when you hear that?
Well, I don't hope anything particular. I don't think what I hope for young attorneys what I hope for attorneys and people starting to practice law is that they understand that they are in a really privileged position. Not everybody has the ability to do it. Not everybody has the opportunity to do it. Not everybody is lucky enough to practice law in Wake County, which has a really great bar, I think. And that's the other good thing about practicing law. Lawyers are smart. They're good to be around. They're smart people. Lawyers are fun to be around. You can have a lot of fun laughing with people that are practicing law. Anyway, so I don't look at any one particular thing, but I'm very proud to have been a lawyer, and I hope that it remains a point of pride for people to say that they practice law and that they understand that they can really do good things as a lawyer.